All right, we are live. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter. Today, we have a very special guest for our indie author live chats, and that is Mandy. Hi, Mandy. Thank
Hi,
you.
Amy. Hi, Catherine. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me.
It is such a pleasure. For those who don't know, Mandy is the author of the Riverstone Saga. And the first volume, the cover is actually what grabbed my attention right away because we have not known each other as long as maybe some of the other authors you've seen in the last week. But it's a good sign of how a good cover not only grabs readers but can grab writer friends. Because I immediately saw her cover and then I read the premise and I was like, I have to know more. So, Mandy, why don't you introduce yourself for the viewers who don't know who you are or what your books are about?
My name is Mandy, and I have write historical fantasy. So my books are set during kind of a 16th century timeline, and they're all based around women, kind of rising up against their circumstances to make their own fates in life. My first book is The Rise of Riverstone. That one came out last November, and I'm currently working on book two, which I'm planning on next March. It's my timeline for that. So yay!
Yes, it is. It is beautiful. I've actually got the screen that I'm gonna see if I can share without knocking either of us off, just so people can see. And hey, Luna, I see you're on. We're doing this live. So if you're watching it live and you have questions for Mandy about Mandy's books, about writing, about publishing, feel free to drop them in the chat. Here is Mandy's website, and that is the cover of The Rise of Riverstone, which is just gorgeous.
I love
So,
it.
Mandy, who did your cover design?
My cover designer is the wonderful Covers by Violet. She is not on Twitter, but she is on Instagram. Rena was amazing. She basically, I filled out a thing and I was like, make it amazing. I wanted the title to really stand out. I really love books where like the title is the main focus.
Mm.
And she illustrated this cover and did an incredible job. And I can't wait to work with her for book two. I'm so excited.
It's truly stunning. I know cover design can be hard as an indie author and also a little pricey. I see we've got some other authors on tonight, but I do think personally, and I'd love to hear what you think,
Mhm.
that the cover is probably the investment that I feel was the most worth it when I published my first book.
Absolutely. I mean, like you said, you were drawn to the cover. That's the first thing people see, and it attracts them to read, the back to see if it's something that they're interested in. I feel like if you're going to invest in anything, it's going to be a cover and an editor for your novel. I mean, just budget it in and hire a great cover designer because that's what's going to bring people in.
Absolutely. Luna wants to know how many books are you planning for in the saga? Do you know how many you're planning for?
I am planning at least seven. I have at this point that I know the characters and I know the focus of at least seven of the books. And it follows a family. So it's seven women within a family generationally down the road. So,
Wow. So you
yeah.
got it planned out long term. Are you a planner then, or more of a plantser?
No! I usually know the overall theme. I know I know my big start. Like usually I have something big happen, and then I know kind of a few points in the middle, and I know my climax. And then all of the rest in between, it's all about the journey. And sometimes
Mm-hmm.
stuff I don't expect happens. And I kind of know the gist of the story. But other than that, yeah, I just wing it.
So have you ever changed an ending because of that?
Yes. Yes. Um, Sometimes, as you're writing stuff, it happens that you don't expect, and it can make your book even better. I know I've actually had times where I planned character deaths and have been devastated by the end of the book if they're going to die. And sometimes I'll be like, never mind. I think they're going to live. But,
So how long have you been working on the saga? Because there's so many details that go into writing historical fantasy versus like making up your whole new world.
right. Um, and there's a little bit more freedom when it is a fantasy. I kind of try to stick to, the fashion, the technology, and some of the language of the time. But because it's set in a fantasy setting, I did have a lot of freedom as far as that. But the Rise of Riverstone probably took me about 4 years from start to finish. And there was a lot of, maybe not 4 years straight, but, and I also, in those 4 years, wrote the first two drafts of the next two books. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah, and started the fourth. So, but the time that I actually sat down and I was like, this is the thing that's going to happen, I'm going to publish this book, is probably about a year and a half. Yeah.
Wow. So speaking of publishing, one of the questions we get often on these live streams is what made you decide to go indie or self-published if you're a reader joining and you're like, I'm not really sure what indie means versus querying and pitching to a big press.
Yeah. I wanted the freedom of my own timeline. I don't have time, to have deadlines. I have a lot going on. So I wanted the freedom of being able to design my own cover and hire my own editor. And, those are the main reasons. It's just the freedom of controlling it the way I wanted to. Obviously traditional publishing comes with a lot of good PR, which as an indie author, I have to do that on my own. But, indie definitely is from what I hear, it's a lot of freedom, of your own to do what you want to do. So.
Right. All the trade-offs.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about the response you've received from book one, because I know I just dropped the Amazon link in there in the comments for anybody on Facebook, but it's really high rated. You've already got several reviews on Amazon. So how's the response been from like your friends and your family? Did they know you were writing?
Most, like my close family always and friends knew that because I've been writing since I was like 16. So it was very exciting for them to be like, oh, you're back to writing again. And they've been very, very supportive. My family friends who have read the book have really liked it. And that's just been a good boost. And I think some of it too is like when strangers like it, it means so much more. Like, of course, your mom's going to say your book was amazing. But when a stranger said, this is my second favorite book, that really gives you a lot of good validation. It feels really great, especially as a, just a winging it type of author. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. So you had that support going into it. I know you, like many indie authors, you work too. How do you find time to manage it all, to manage the writing and the planning, because you've got so many books in the works to come out in the series still?
Yeah, my free time is very precious. I have, my days off of work and especially when the kids are in school, I have a day off where they're in school, and that's my day. Like, I'm editing, I'm planning, I'm doing PR stuff. The small window, sometimes after they're in bed, that's my time. That's my time. The weekends, if we're not doing something, sometimes I'll have some time to, do that. It is hard with a, busy household, but I just find every moment that I can to get stuff done. Yeah.
Yeah. So shifting over to content a little bit, and I'm going to say that for these questions, we don't really want to give away spoilers. So, but can you tell us a little bit about the main character in your book?
Absolutely. Laria is my main character in The Rise of Riverstone, and in the beginning of the book, you kind of get the sense that she's kind of spoiled. She's a very high status. Her father is a knight, and he's like basically the right hand of the king. And so she's very privileged, but she's also very wild. Their culture is very centered around horses. So she's always sneaking out of the house and riding her horse. She wants nothing to do with being a lady. And then something happens that changes her whole life. And she has to kind of decide, am I just going to accept this, or am I going to do something about it? She's very strong-willed. She's kind of has a lot of me. She's kind of snarky. She's kind of stubborn, you know, very determined young lady. And I just hope that my readers fall in love with her humor and her, you know, her determination. And she's just like, she's a typical, I'm not going to be like other girls type of a heroine. And yeah, she's probably one of the best characters that I've written, you know, in my whole span of writing. So.
Oh, that's awesome. And she's so unique because she is strong-willed, but she voluntarily puts herself in this position where she's pretending to not be able to speak, pretending to not be able to hear, pretending to serve somebody else. So I'm sure, you know, all those values come together.
Right.
In a very intriguing way.
Yeah, and I wanted to, especially as a woman, writing a woman, wanted her to be the force for the decisions that she's making. You know, so often you read a book where it's the man saying, this is what you're going to do, and this is what we're going to do. And I wanted so much of her choices to drive so much of the story. And sometimes it works for her, sometimes it doesn't. But I just really wanted to write a strong, you know, strong-willed female character.
That's right. And so speaking of men in the story, her sworn enemy is, and I know this is, if you're watching, you're like, spoilers, but it's not, it's in the blurb on Amazon. So her sworn enemy comes up to her with a proposition. How big a role does this enemy play in the book?
Huge. He plays a huge role in the book. Yeah.
So if you're watching and you're like, ooh, I love sworn enemy stuff, this is for you.
Yeah.
Definitely. So I know a lot of times us as authors, we put a little bit about ourselves into characters or into our worlds. Is there any specific character that you feel like you really wrote yourself into in the book, or is it more scattered around?
Laria, definitely. And in a lot of ways, you know, the unconventional type of person, her humor, her love of horses. She was a lot of me. And I kind of also take other people I know and put them in some of the characters, but she was definitely modeled after, like I said, especially my humor. And so.
Yes. So, let's see. So, if you had an opportunity to go traditional with this series, would you take it, or would you use that for a different series?
That's a great question. I think it would depend on how much control I would have over everything. My covers especially, I absolutely love it. But if I could take that and roll it into traditional, I would consider it. It's definitely a good opportunity to go traditional. If I could go traditional and make that my full-time job, you know, that's definitely a consideration. I would love to be able to have writing be my full-time job. So, yeah.
Right. I would say for viewers watching, besides the person who asked, if this is something that interests you, there are multiple perspectives on my channel from past interview people. Casey Freeman, who I interviewed in May, she actually left traditional publishing to come to indie. So that's one mentality. And then you have other well-known indie authors. I interviewed Emma Hamm on Instagram last year, and she's a award-winning, I think, but definitely a best-selling author on her own accord. So it's really dependent on your book and your journey. And yeah, great question though.
Yeah, that is a good question.
So, is this enemies to lovers?
I we said no spoilers.
Yeah, we're spoilers.
Spoiler. There's
You
the
have to read the
potential for
book.
that.
Is this YA new adult or adult?
I would say, because I've also kind of struggled with that, I would say more new adults. I would say it's kind of 18 plus in a lot of ways, as opposed to young adult.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the characters are young, but some of the content is not.
Right. Yeah. And, young adult goes down as young as 12, which whenever I share
Yeah,
that with people,
right.
some people are really surprised by that. But it starts
Yeah.
at 12 and goes to 18, and
Mm-hmm.
then new adult is usually 18 to 23,
Mm-hmm.
and then adult is basically anything 18
Right.
plus. But,
Yeah, I have a 16-year-old daughter
Luna,
who I wouldn't let read it.
the romantic interest is part of the book.
Yes, there is romance in the book. Because I am a hopeless romantic, and I can't write a book without romance in it.
Uh, but I love that it's not a romantic main theme, which is
No,
great.
it's like a subplot. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're looking for a romantic main theme, you can enjoy this one and then maybe think up some fan fiction.
My husband does that all the time. He's like, I'm gonna write some fan fiction now.
Never look up your own fan fiction.
Sometimes when you don't know.
Oh, that's right. So, yeah, it's really. Oh, goodness. So, how dark does this series get? Is this more of a dark fantasy or more like classic epic fantasy?
I would say more classic. It definitely. I'm thinking of a book I'm actually reading right now that's very dark, and it's full of shadows and blood magic and everything. This is not that. Some of the content, some of the things that she has to go through, is a little dark. But but I wouldn't consider the books themselves dark fantasy.
So, tell us a little bit, Mandy, how did you get into writing, especially a niche genre like the historical fantasy?
I've always loved historical fiction in general. Jane Austen is my favorite author, and she was an inspiration to start writing when I was very young. And then I sort of came into this historical fantasy by accident because I wanted a historical novel, but I wanted some of the freedom of having a fantasy. And I've never really read a lot of fantasy, so there's not like a lot of magic and that sort of thing. But I wanted the freedom of being able to write a story where the places were what I wanted. And I didn't want to be bogged down in like researching distances and places and customs and towns and cities. I wanted all of the freedom being able to make up my own and my own people and my own cultures. But I've always been fascinated by history in general, and that's why I liked the almost like the limitations they put you on. I feel like you have to not necessarily work harder, but it's not easy living in the 16th century. You can't just solve all your problems that easily. It brings its own set of problems, and I really like that. It's almost simple, but almost a little bit more difficult. So I really like that challenge. And of course I like flowing dresses and courts and nights.
So, are you a Pride, Prejudice, and Zombies fan?
I'm more of a purist. I love
Nothing
Pride
wrong
and
with that.
Prejudice. I read Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, and I was really excited, but sorry if I make enemies, but I didn't like the book very much.
Well, that's okay.
I thought it was going to be more unique than it was. I'm just like, I'll just go back, watch Colin Firth.
Well, when you're a purist, it's just hard to open up sometimes to the books that gave us our starts.
Yeah.
Like, I know there's lots of Lord of the Rings lovers who are on the fence about what this new Amazon series is going to be, and that's a prime example. There's so much opportunity, but so much that could go wrong.
Yeah.
It comes back to that fan fiction.
Yeah.
Oh, but yeah, so you've been writing a long time. Have you written a lot of series before this one that you decided to publish?
No, I wrote mostly standalones before the series. I never really published any. I did publish something once, but then I ended up taking it down. But I wrote a lot of Regency type
Mm.
stories. Um, but yeah, I never wrote a series before this. But I was really excited about writing one because I wanted to stick with these characters in this family and you know, go on adventures together.
Absolutely. So sorry, the lighting. Oh, there it goes. Okay. We were talking about cats earlier, and it seems like on so many lives the cats are like, "Oh, hi." So, do you have any writer pets?
Any writer pets? What do
Yes.
you mean by that?
Like cats or dogs or.
I do. I have 4 cats and I have 2 dogs. And a couple of them I'll be really into editing and I'll be working really hard on here and he will just like come up and drop his butt right on what I'm working on. He'll ignore me all day long until I'm working really hard. He's an orange cat. And then I also have a black fluffy one that does the same thing. But I know I have a dog that's kind of circling right now, wondering how to get in here. I have like myself cordoned off so they won't get in here.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Yeah, the cats are so aloof, and then when I do lives, they're like, "Oh, I have to be in on the live."
Right.
So,
You're doing
absolutely.
something important.
It's like, where have you been all day? Oh, goodness. So, what kind of books do you read for fun? Do you read a lot of historical fantasy? I know you like historical fiction.
I do. I've been trying to branch out. I've been reading actually more YA. I've been reading more fantasy. Yep, historical fiction, some historical fantasy. Those are the main things that I read.
Mm.
And then I do read horror and thriller as well. So I like a good ghost story.
So, a broad variety.
Yeah, yeah,
And any indie? Because I know I found you through Twitter, through
yeah,
other indie author friends, which was incredible.
yeah, yeah. I have started reading a lot more indie, and I just think we need to give them more love, because like I said, they don't have the same PR as a traditionally published. And so I've met a lot of indie authors on Twitter, and I've gotten their books, and a bunch of them are on my TBR. I read a bunch last month, and I've read some this month or the month before, and have found a lot of great indie reads, just through Twitter. So
Mm.
it's been great.
So if you're watching on Facebook or you're watching on YouTube, the link to Mandy's Twitter and website are in the description boxes, and you can go give Mandy a follow over there. There, really, the community has been amazing. It's a great way
Yeah.
to find new authors. Like I've stocked up on a ton of books this month
Mhm.
to read, and yeah. So, do you have a favorite traditional author and a favorite indie author?
Ooh. Well, my heart will always belong to Jane Austen, but as far as current traditional published, I do. Oh, geez, that's a tough question. I really like the Philippa Gregory books, her historical fiction books. Um, I know, and I don't have like any particular favorite. Like if it looks good, I'll pick it up. I do lean towards women authors
Mm-hmm.
more than male authors, which is I've just come to realize looking at my stack of books. Um, yeah, and then I don't really have a favorite indie. I've read a couple of different authors, and I'm like, I would definitely read more of your books, but I don't have a favorite. And I'm not just
Yeah.
saying that because some of them might be listening. there's so many great authors out there. It's really, really hard to pick a favorite. I'd have multiple that I would be like, if their book's coming out, I want to read it. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Well, this has been so much fun. I really appreciate you joining. If you're watching live, please go check out Mandy's book, The Rise of Riverstone. It is up on Amazon, and the links should be in the description boxes. Um, it was 99 cents at the end of last month, which was a huge steal.
Yeah.
And Mandy, I truly apologize that we had to reschedule your
No,
interview
that
from
was
last
awful.
month. But
Sorry.
thank you for joining us and just being so candid with us about your journey.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
It's been such a pleasure. If you're watching, everybody, we still have a couple indie author live chats coming up in June. We've got the writers of Rohan who will be on in a couple weeks to talk about what they've done over the past 6 months. And you can get to know some other indie book reviews, including one for Mandy's in the next few weeks, on my Friday indie author review reports. Thank you all so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.